$8. That was what they settled on, after the arguing stopped, and the auctioneer wiped the sweat from his neck with a rag that had seen better days. $8 for a woman who hadn't eaten in 3, maybe 4 days. Standing in the mud outside the Creston trading post with her wrists bound in rope that had already cut through the skin. Tilda watched it happen from across the road. She didn't mean to. She'd come into town for salt and a new flint, same as any other week, and she'd ended up standing, still in the middle of the street, with her horse's reins in her hand, and her heart somewhere near her boots. The woman on the makeshift platform couldn't have been more than 22. Dark hair matted to her face. A dress that had been blue once, maybe, but was the color of creek mud now. She wasn't crying. That was the part that stuck with Tilda, the way she wasn't crying. She had gone somewhere else behind her eyes, somewhere no one could follow, and she was waiting for whatever came next, the way an animal waits in a trap, still, patient, past hope. The man who bought her was already drunk. He had the kind of laugh that carried across a street and made children go quiet. He handed over his bills with a flourish, like he was proud of himself, and he grabbed the woman's arm above the elbow and started hauling her toward the hitching post. Tilda didn't decide. That was the honest truth of it. She didn't think. Her feet moved first and the rest of her followed, and she heard herself say, clear and flat, "Let go of her arm." The drunk man turned. He looked at Tilda, the way men like him always looked at women like her, measuring, dismissing, arriving at a conclusion that cost him nothing. She was a broad-shouldered woman, not quite 40, wearing a canvas coat with a tear at the shoulder. She hadn't gotten around to mending. She had a skinning knife on her belt, and she'd had it there so long it felt like part of her own body. "Walk away," he said. "I'll buy her off you," Tilda said. "What you paid plus $2 got his attention." The drunk man had the kind of greed that overruled everything else, including his pride. He looked at the woman he was holding, looked back at Tilda, ran the numbers. $3 over, he said. 2. He let go of the woman's arm. Tilda handed over the money, and she took the rope ends that led to the woman's wrists, and she cut them with her knife right there in the street, and she said, quietly, so only the woman could hear, "You don't have to go anywhere with me, but if you've got nowhere else to be, I've got a cabin with a spare room and enough food to get through the season." The woman looked at her, those empty eyes focused, slowly, like she was coming back from wherever she'd gone. She said, "Why?" Not a question. Exactly. More like she'd forgotten how questions worked and was trying to remember. "Because I was you once," Tilda said. "Long time ago." She didn't explain it further. She tied her salt and her flint to the saddle, and she started walking her horse out of town, and the woman followed. Her name was Rue. She offered it that first evening, sitting at Tilda's table, with a bowl of soup she was eating too fast. Tilda didn't say anything about the speed of the eating. She'd been there herself. "Rue," Tilda repeated, like she was setting it somewhere safe. "My mother named me. She's gone. I'm sorry." Rue looked at the soup. "How far are we from Creston? 7 miles. And the nearest other town? 14 miles the other direction, but the road washes out in spring. You'd need to know the ridge path." Tilda looked at her. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel trapped. I'm telling you because you should know where you are." Rue was quiet for a long moment. "My sister is still there, in Creston." Tilda set her spoon down. "The same man?" Rue nodded. "He couldn't afford us both. He took Vanna first, and then he—" She stopped, started again. "I don't know where Vanna is now. He could have moved her on by the time we get back." Tilda looked at the fire. She'd lived alone in this mountain cabin for 11 years, and she had learned to move slow and think slower, and not to let herself get pulled into other people's disasters, because disaster had a way of expanding to fill whatever space you gave it. She knew all of that. She thought it all, clearly, and in order. Then she said, "We'll go back for her, but not tonight. You need to eat and sleep first, or you'll fall down in the road and be no good to her." Rue looked up. Something cracked open in her face, just slightly, just at the edges. "You don't know me," she said. "No," Tilda agreed, "but I know what your sister is going through tonight, more or less, so we go at first light." The spare room was small and cold, and Tilda gave Rue 2 blankets and an extra pair of wool socks. She also gave her the wash basin and a bar of lye soap and clean water she'd heated on the stove, and she left her alone, because privacy was the first thing taken, and the first thing that needed to be given back. She sat by the fire herself and sharpened her knife, and did not think too carefully about what she was agreeing to. In the morning, Rue came out of the spare room already dressed. She'd done something to her hair, braided it back, practical, out of the way. She looked different, harder, more present. "I know where he keeps her," Rue said. "He has a property south of the trading post. A house, sort of, more of a shack. He locks the door, but the window latch is broken on the inside. Vanna told me the last time I saw her." Tilda turned her coffee cup in her hands. "You have a plan. I have the beginning of a plan." They rode back into Creston in the grey part of morning, when the drunks had gone home and the honest people weren't awake yet. Tilda had done this kind of thing before, not this exact thing, but things that required the same qualities. Steadiness, quiet, no hesitation at the moment of commitment. The shack south of the trading post was exactly what Rue had described. One room, a padlocked door, a single window with its curtain drawn. Tilda held the horses. Rue went to the window. Tilda watched the road. Her knife was on her belt, and her hand was close to it, not touching, just near. The morning was cold and smelled of mud and horse and cook fires starting up a few streets over. She heard the window go up. She heard Rue say something, low and fast. Then there was a long silence that felt like a held breath, the whole town holding it, and then Rue appeared at the side of the shack with a younger girl. Thinner, darker under the eyes, moving fast and low to the ground. They made it to the horses. They rode. Tilda didn't breathe right until they were a mile outside of town, on the pine trail, the trees closing around them like a door shutting. Vanna was 17. She sat at Tilda's table the way Rue had sat the night before, eating fast, not talking much, but her eyes moved, sharp, watchful. And Tilda could see she was cataloguing the room, calculating distances, assessing. Survival instincts that cut in automatically, without being asked to. Tilda made extra soup. She did not ask them how they'd ended up in Creston, being sold in the mud outside the trading post. That wasn't her business yet, and possibly never would be. People came to terrible circumstances through 100 different roads, and it wasn't her place to make them walk back through it before they were ready. But that night, after Vanna had fallen asleep in the spare room, the two sisters sharing the single cot, curled together like they'd probably slept as children. Rue came back out and sat across from Tilda by the dying fire. She said, "Our father." Tilda looked at the coals. He owed money to a man in Fort Willis. Bad debts, gambling. When he couldn't pay, he offered us instead. Rue's voice was flat, not cold exactly, flattened, the way a road gets flattened by enough weight passing over it. He shook the man's hand and we were there for it. He shook his hand and he didn't look at us while he did it. Tilda thought about the things she could say. She decided not to say most of them. "You're safe here for as long as you need," she said. "Both of you. We can't stay forever." Nobody stays forever anywhere, but you can stay until you figure out the next thing. She put another log on the fire, more out of habit than need. "You know how to work?" "We know how to work." "Then there's enough to do here to justify 2 extra pairs of hands. I've been meaning to repair the north fence for 3 seasons, and the root cellar door is rotting at the bottom." Rue looked at her. Something in her expression shifted, subtle, the way light shifts when a cloud moves off the sun. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. The same question as before, but different now, less suspicious, more genuine. "I told you," Tilda said. "I was you once, you said that yesterday, but you didn't say the rest of it." Tilda was quiet for a moment. Outside the wind moved through the pines, the long sound of it like breathing. I was 19, she said. Different state, different century almost. A man who called himself a businessman. I got away because a woman I'd never met before put herself between me and him in a general store in a town I didn't know the name of. She took me to her house and gave me soup and a spare room. She looked at the fire. I never found out her name. She didn't offer it, and I didn't think to ask until it was too late. Rue was quiet. So, Tilda said, that's why. The weeks that followed had their own rhythm. Tilda woke before dawn, same as always. The difference was that now there were 2 other people waking with her, learning the shape of the morning, where the axe was kept, how many logs it took to get the stove to temperature, the particular way the water barrel lid had to be set, or the raccoons got into it overnight. Vanna turned out to be better with animals than either of them expected. She'd grown up around horses, she said, before everything, and Tilda's bay mare, who had never in 11 years allowed a stranger to brush her without flattening her ears, stood perfectly still under Vanna's hands. Rue was the one who fixed things. She had a methodical quality to her. Patient and exacting, the kind of person who will take something apart completely before she tries to repair it, because she needs to understand the whole before she can address any part. She rebuilt the root cellar door in 4 days, using timber Tilda had in the woodpile, and it was better than the original. Tilda watched them, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't name it right away. It took her almost 2 weeks to understand that the thing she was feeling was the specific weight of a house that had people in it. She'd forgotten that weight. She hadn't known she missed it. It was in the 4th week that Tilda fell. She was patching the north fence, standing on the 2nd rail to reach the top crossbeam, and the rail gave. Old wood, dry rotted through. And she went down hard on her left side, her arm underneath her, and she heard something crack and felt the specific, clarifying pain of a break. She lay in the mud for a moment, taking inventory. Left forearm, she decided, not the wrist. The forearm mid-shaft, which was bad but not catastrophic. She was a long way from the cabin, maybe 300 yards, and she had to get there on her own because there was no one coming, except Rue appeared at the fence line within 2 minutes, because she'd heard the fall. She appeared at a run, which slowed when she saw Tilda on the ground, and she came the rest of the way at a steady walk because she was the kind of person who understood that running wouldn't help anyone at that point. She crouched down. She looked at the arm. How bad? She asked. Broken. Forearm. Can you walk? Yes. Then let's get you inside first. The rest of it we figure out inside. She helped Tilda up with a steadiness that came from something beyond her years, one hand on Tilda's right arm, matching her pace, not rushing, not making a production of it. When Tilda's breath caught from the pain, Rue just slowed down and waited, and then they kept moving. Inside, Vanna had already put water on. She'd seen them coming from the window. Rue knew how to set a bone. She said it matter-of-factly the way, "You say you know how to harness a horse." Something learned early, out of necessity, not something to be proud of or ashamed of. She splinted the arm with 2 flat pieces of the rotted fence rail and strips torn from one of Tilda's older shirts, and she bound it tight and even. Tilda looked at her hands while she worked. Steady, certain. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. "Our mother was a midwife," Rue said. "She taught us field medicine, said we'd need it, living where we did." A pause, the smallest hesitation. She was right about a lot of things. The arm healed slowly. That was the nature of bones. For 3 weeks, Tilda could not do the work she was accustomed to doing, and Rue and Vanna did it instead, and Tilda sat in the chair by the window and watched the snow come in off the peaks and felt the unfamiliar sensation of being cared for. It sat strangely on her, at first. She wanted to get up. She wanted to be useful. She lay awake some nights with the restlessness of it, the itch of inaction. But she couldn't do what she couldn't do, and the arm needed time, and gradually she learned to let the strangeness of it settle. One evening, Vanna brought her soup, without being asked, the way Tilda had brought soup to both of them in those first days and set it on the table next to her and went back to whatever she'd been doing and didn't say a word about it. Tilda looked at the soup for a long moment. Then she started eating. The trouble came in the 5th week, which was maybe when it was always going to come. Tilda had known, somewhere in the back of her mind, that men like the one who had bought Rue didn't stay comfortable with their losses. He came with 2 others, mid-morning, on a day when the sky was the color of old pewter and the ground was hard with frost. Tilda heard the horses on the trail, and she knew before she could have said why she knew. She told Rue and Vanna to stay inside. She put on her coat, and she went out to the porch. The man from Creston was less impressive in daylight, away from the crowd that had been laughing with him. He was just a drunk who'd gotten drunker and spent a week working himself into a righteous anger about $8 and what they represented to his sense of himself. "You took my property," he said. "I didn't take anything," Tilda said. "I bought a woman off you fair and legal in front of 30 witnesses. And then I went back and removed a second woman from a situation she hadn't consented to be in. That second situation is the one you might want to think carefully about before you say another word." One of the men with him looked uncomfortable. Not the other one, but one of them. "I have a bill of sale," the drunk man said. "So do I," Tilda said. She had her knife on her belt. She also had, just inside the door, a rifle she'd owned for 20 years and could use with her right hand while her left was still splintered. She did not make a move toward either. "I think," she said, "you should go back to Creston. I think you should go back, and I think you should drink off whatever it is that brought you out here. And tomorrow morning you should think about whether the trouble you're looking for is worth finding." The uncomfortable man said something to the drunk man, low, under his breath. The drunk man's jaw worked. He wanted to press it. She could see him wanting to. But he looked at her, at the steadiness of her, the absolute lack of alarm in her face, and something in him decided against it. He turned his horse around. She stood on the porch until they were out of sight. Then she went back inside and sat down in her chair, and her hands were shaking slightly, which she had not let happen while they were in view. "You didn't call for us," she said. "You weren't needed. We could have helped." "I know," Tilda said. "That's not the same as being needed." Rue looked at her for a long moment. Then she went to the stove and poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to Tilda and sat down across from her, and they drank without talking, which had become one of their habits, one of the comfortable ones. Spring came the way it always came in the mountains. Sudden, and then gradual, and then sudden again. The frost went out of the ground and the mud season started, and the wildflowers came up through the edges of it, small and stubborn and yellow. Vanna found work in the next settlement, over 3 miles up the North Ridge path, helping a family with 4 children and a farm that needed more hands than they had. She came back in the evenings at first, and then she started staying over twice a week, and then she came back on Sundays and for supper on Thursdays, and the shape of it became its own kind of arrangement. Not gone, not staying, something between. It was only Rue and Tilda most evenings. One night, near the end of the mud season, when the wood had burned down to coals, and neither of them had moved to add more, Rue said, "I found a letter." Tilda looked up. In the spare room, under the floorboard, loose one. An old letter. She hesitated. "It was addressed to you." Tilda was quiet for a moment. "What did it say?" "I didn't read it. It was sealed." She went and got it. Tilda turned it in her hands. The paper yellowed, the seal old. Her name, on the front in handwriting she recognized after 11 years. Without having thought about it. "The woman," Rue said. "The one you told me about, from the general store." Tilda looked at her. Did you recognize the handwriting?" The thing was, she did. She couldn't have said how, after all this time. But she did. She broke the seal. She read it. Rue watched her face, careful and still, not asking. When she put it down, Tilda looked at the coals for a long time. "She found me," she said. "She found the cabin." Eventually. Didn't want to intrude, she said. She left the letter under the floorboard in case I ever found it, or in case I never did. She looked at the paper again. She said she hoped I was all right. She said she hoped I'd found people worth staying for. The fire was almost out. Outside, the spring wind was moving through the pines. Rue didn't say anything for a while. Then, "Did you?" Tilda looked at her. At the steadiness of her face, the quickness of her mind, the hands that could set a bone and rebuild a door, and hold a frightened horse calm. At the way she'd stood in the mud in front of that shack in Creston, and gone through the window without being asked to be brave about it, just doing the thing that needed doing. "I think so," Tilda said. "I think I'm starting to." Summer was full and green and loud with insects. The way summer in the mountains is when you're paying attention. They fixed the north fence together, properly this time, with new timber, no dry-rotted rails. Rue held the crossbeams, and Tilda hammered with her right hand, the left arm still not quite full strength, and they didn't talk much while they worked, which was one of the best ways to spend an afternoon. On a Wednesday, in the middle of June, Rue asked, "Do you ever think about leaving?" Tilda drove a nail. "I used to, the first few years." "What stopped you?" "Nothing stopped me. I just stopped wanting to." She looked down the fence line, the new pale wood bright against the old. "I built things here. Hard to walk away from what you built." Rue was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what comes next. For me, tell me. I think I want to stay, through the next winter at least. I want to learn the ridge path, all of it, the parts you haven't shown me yet. I want to get good with the mare the way Vanna is. I want to—" She stopped. Reconsidered. "I don't want to be someone passing through. I don't want to be something you're doing out of obligation." Tilda set her hammer down on the fence post. "Do I seem like someone who does things out of obligation?" Rue looked at her. "No. Then you have your answer." In the fall, when the aspens went gold and the air got that particular knife sharpness that meant the first snow was close, Rue found the double eagle coin. She'd been cleaning out the old storage chest in the corner of the main room, a task Tilda had put off for roughly 5 years, and she came across a small cloth pouch at the bottom under everything else. She set it on the table without opening it. When Tilda came in from the woodpile, Rue pointed at it. "What is it?" Tilda sat down heavily, her boots still muddy. She looked at the pouch. She hadn't thought about it in a long time. "Open it," she said. Inside, 1 coin, $20 gold piece, old issue, the surface worn smooth from handling. Rue turned it in her fingers. "This is what they paid for you," she said. Not a question. "The woman who helped me," Tilda said. "She gave it to me when I left," she said. "She said it wasn't a debt I owed her. She said it was something to have when I had nothing else. Something to remind me what I was worth, which was more than any number on any coin." Rue set the coin on the table between them. She looked at it. Then she looked at Tilda. "I have something," she said. She went to the spare room and came back with a small fold of cloth that she set next to the coin. Inside it, $8, creased and old. The same bills that Tilda had paid in the mud outside the Creston trading post. Tilda stared at them. "I had them," Rue said quietly. "From the beginning, I had them sewn into the hem of my dress. Money from before, money I'd kept hidden from my father, because I knew, I think I always knew, that the day would come when I'd need to be able to go." She paused. "When you cut the rope, when you offered me the room, I could have used these to go anywhere I chose." The wind moved outside. A log settled in the stove. "But you stayed," Tilda said. "I stayed." Rue looked at her across the table, across the coin, and the bills between them. "I'm not staying because I have nowhere else to go. I want you to understand that. I have been able to leave since the second morning. I am still here because I choose to be here." Tilda looked at the money, $8 that she had handed over in a muddy street and never expected to see again. She understood, then, what the woman from the general store must have felt. 11 years ago, watching a girl walk away from her house with a small cloth pouch and a head start on the rest of her life. This was the thing that couldn't be bought or paid for or settled in a ledger. The coin on the table and the bills beside it. They were just paper and metal. The thing that mattered was sitting across from her, choosing to be here on a Tuesday evening in October with the first snow on its way and a cabin that needed 2 people to manage it through the winter. Tilda pushed the coin across the table to Rue. "Keep it," she said. "Same reason," she told me. Rue looked at it for a long moment. Then she picked it up and held it in her palm, this small bright thing, worn smooth from all the hands that had carried it through the years. Outside, through the window, the first flakes were beginning to fall. Soft and white, settling on the new pale wood of the north fence they had built together. And in the cabin on the mountain, the winter was just beginning, and neither of them was going anywhere.